I'm not in a red box yet. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Overview and Scrutiny Commission meeting of the 8th of March 2021. Welcome members of the press and the public watching this meeting live. I'm Councillor Tina Belvin, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. This is a meeting being held in public and not a public meeting. There will be no public question time at any council meeting while virtual committee meetings are being held. So I'd like to stress the public and the press can still hear and see the meeting, but public speaking has been suspended and any written questions submitted in advance that were deemed acceptable by the council's monitoring officer will be read out as answered. There will be no supplementary questions. The agenda for this meeting is published and available on the council's website. For any committee meeting held virtually, all voting will be held by a recorded vote taken by the Democratic Services team member on behalf of the chair. The exceptions to this are the approving of the minutes from the previous meeting and any other procedure item, or where the item's sole recommendation is for the Commission to note the report. For those items, the chair will move the item and it is presumed agreed unless a dissenting comment from any Commission member is made. Before I invite members of the Commission to confirm their attendance, I ask that they please ensure their mobile phones are switched off, their backgrounds are plain or nondescript, and they're aware of their surroundings so that they're not disturbed during the meeting. This includes making sure all TVs, radios are switched off, please. Commission members are reminded that they should have their microphones turned off unless speaking, and their cameras turned off unless they're requesting to speak. When asked to speak, please turn on your microphone to unmute yourself, pause for 3 seconds to allow for the slight time connection delay. With this in mind, Commission members are asked to be aware of who they will follow in the voting process and prepare accordingly. May I ask the officers supporting this meeting to introduce themselves, giving their name and job title, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Chris Pedlow, Democratic Services Manager.
Heather Girling, Democratic Services Officer, and also Chair, we've received no apologies for the meeting.
Thank you. We will now be taking introductions together with items 2 and 3. Please can I ask committee members, when called upon, to confirm their name and the ward they represent, if they have any declarations of interest and whipping declarations to make, and if they agree with the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission held on the 1st of February 2021.
Councillor Aylings.
Hello, my name's Marion Ayling. I'm the board member for Bewbush and Bullfield North. I have no declaration of interest and I agree the minutes from the last meeting. Thank you.
Councillor Belvin.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Tina Belvin. I represent Pound Hill North and Forge Wood. I have no declarations of interest to make and I agree the minutes of the meeting of the 1st of February 2021.
Councillor Bob Burgess.
I'm Councillor Bob Burgess, Councillor for Three Bridges and the Town Centre. I approve the minutes. I have no whipping declarations. I do have personal non-prejudicial interests on the following items. Agenda item 7, much of the proposed extension of the AQMA lies within Three Bridges and I am a councillor for that ward. And in agenda item 8, I am a council representative on the committee at Open House and also a member of the committee of Crawley Festival. Both of these organisations are mentioned on page 58 in table 1, paragraph 5.9. Thank you.
Councillor Richard Barrett.
Yes, thank you. I'm Richard Barrett. I'm Borough Councillor for Pound Hill North and Forge Wood Ward. I have several declarations of interest to make. Item 6, West Sussex Health and Care in Housing Memorandum of Understanding. I declare a personal interest as a member of West Sussex County Council and also as a trustee of Crawley Open House. Item 8, community grants allocations, as a trustee of Crawley Open House. And item 9, Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee. I declare a personal interest as a member of West Sussex County Council. And I'm happy to approve the minutes of the 1st of February meeting of the Commission. Thank you very much.
Councillor Lanza.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Bob Lanza, Pound Hill South and Worth Councillor. I approve the minutes of the previous meeting. I have no whipping declarations. I declare personal interest in item 5, the draft Crawley Economy Recovery Plan, as West Sussex Cabinet Member for Economy and Corporate Resources. I declare a personal interest in the supplemental item, the Crawley Town Investment Plan, on the same basis, and also as a member of the Crawley Economy Recovery Task Force and Town Fund Board. Thank you.
Councillor Malik.
Good evening, Councillor Shehzad Malik from Langley Green and Tushmore Ward. I do not have any disclosure of interest or whipping declaration to make, and I approve the minutes of the last meeting held on 1st of February 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tom McElhaney. Councillor Pendleton.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Alison Pendleton, Pound Hill South and Worth Ward. I have no whipping declarations or declarations of interest to make, and I approve the minutes of the meeting on the 1st of February 2021.
Councillor Rana.
Good evening, I'm Tahira Rana, Councillor for Broadfield. I approve of the minutes of the last meeting, and I don't have any declarations or interest to declare. Thank you.
Can I just do one further check to see if Councillor McElhaney is on the call? Chair, he doesn't appear to be. For record's sake, there are other councillors on the members' feed. Councillors Brenda Burgess, Councillor Ian Irvine, Councillor Johans, Councillor Peter Smith, and Councillor Peter Lamb. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The Commission agrees that the minutes of the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission held on the 1st of February 2021 are an accurate record of the meeting. In terms of public question time, I can confirm we have received a written question from a member of the public. In accordance with the virtual committee procedure rules, this will be read out by a Democratic Services Officer, and following this, within the procedure rules, there is an option for myself as Chair, a committee member or officer to respond to the question. Therefore, we cannot direct this question specifically to the Cabinet member during public question time. We will make sure this is answered during the debate, but please can I ask the Democratic Services Officer to now read the question, and I ask Kate Wilson, Head of Community Services, to respond, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question relating to the agenda item, Community Grants Allocations 2021-22 Report HCS 27. It's the agenda item 8 for the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. It will also be covered on the Cabinet agenda. Submitted by Chris Cheshire, resident of Gossips Green, on behalf of Crawley Community Action trustees, beneficiaries and supporters. When the CEO of an organisation which has deservedly retained its funding acknowledged their debt to Crawley Community Action, he added, should CCA not exist, it will lead to an increasing disconnect between organisations, impact the community and leave organisations without a support mechanism. Does the Council really want to risk this? End of question.
Kate Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Chris Cheshire, who submitted the question on behalf of CCA trustees. So it's not an officer's position to comment directly on any decision that may or may not be taken by members. However, I can say that the report that's due to be considered this evening does provide both the factual information and rationale that underpin the detailed proposals in line with the approach agreed by Cabinet on the 3rd of February. This should help members with their consideration and conclusions. I'm also aware that the question will be asked of Cabinet on Wednesday evening as well. But what I can say is that officers will continue to work closely with funded partners to reduce any identified risks and work with the sector whilst we transition to a modernised grants programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. We will now move on to the reports. Given we have received a written question relating to the community grants allocation, I'm proposing a change to the agenda order. We've also have a supplemental item on the Crawley Town Deals Fund, which has been published in the supplemental agenda. I have decided that this item should be considered after the draft Crawley Economic Recovery Plan, as it is linked and related to the previous item. Therefore, the agenda order shall be Community Grants Allocation, Agenda 8, AQMA, Agenda Item 7, Memorandum of Understanding, Item 6, Economic Recovery Plan 5, and then the Crawley Town Deals Fund. So we're now going to receive the Community Grants Allocation 2021 to 2022 report from Councillor Lamb, Leader of the Council, and Kate Wilson, Head of Community Services. Please can I ask the Leader to introduce and present the report to the committee? Thank you. Peter. Should we? Can I ask? We seem to have a slight technical problem and we'll be resuming shortly. Is in. Okay. Good evening, Councillor Lamb. Are you ready to present the Community Grants Allocation report, please?
I am very happy to. Apologies, my connection is terrible today, so if I phase in and out, that's what it is. Members will be aware that we have recently.
Sorry, Councillor Lamb has just crashed. We'll try to get him back, otherwise we might have to see if Kate does it on his behalf. We'll try one more time to get Councillor Lamb back. Yeah, unfortunately Councillor Lamb's signal has gone. We'll try Kate.
A bit about £2/3 of £1 million on that before. So
It's gone.
Kate, you're live. We can't get Councillor Lamb. It keeps crashing.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, Chair, are you happy for me to continue the report?
Yes, please, Kate.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So just to remind you that the purpose of the report is to agree the community grants allocations to the voluntary and community sector for the forthcoming year 2021-22. Members of the Commission will remember that we brought a report to you in early February, just outlining the proposed approach to this. So this is the actual detail of the allocations that we're providing. So I think probably the key element of this report is paragraph 5.9, which sets out in detail all of the funded organisations with the proposed allocation for them in what is a transition year in 21-22. Obviously, members will remember that the reason that we've had to do this is so that the council can achieve a balanced budget position for 21-22 onwards, albeit a government grant did allow us just to spread that over a couple of years, and as I've mentioned, 21-22 is that transition year. What we'll be doing in the meantime is obviously developing the new commissioning model and small grants programme that was also set out in more detail in the February meeting. But what we want to ensure is that we take organisations with us where possible, and that we've applied a fairly straightforward and robust criteria to the funding allocations, again, where the detail of which is in both reports. So I think if I can leave that there, Chair, and then obviously I can take any questions that may come. But I would hope that the information that is needed by members is contained within the report, and particularly in that table on page 5.9. Actually, sorry, just to make sure as well that members are aware that the majority of organisations will receive the same funding level as they've enjoyed in 2020 and 21. But there are 4 organisations that are recommended to have their funding either reduced or removed. So I think highlighting those in section 5.8, the first is Crawley Community Action, which wouldn't receive any funding for the forthcoming year. The second is Crawley Museum and Ifield Mill Project. The third is the Crawley Festival, and the fourth is Age UK West Sussex, specifically for their advice and guidance service. And members will note that the rationale behind each of those underneath in 5.8.1 through 5.8.4. So yes, if members have any questions for me, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you, Kate. Before I open it for debate, I'd like to bring Peter in to see if he's got any further comments, because I believe he is with us now.
Yeah, I'm back in, hopefully for good now. I mean, not wanting to add much to what Kate said, the reality is that we are in a year where we're having to choose between unpleasant alternatives. When you've got less money, you've got to decide what are the many potential avenues you can spend it on, which you're going to go down. In the case of the grant report here, we've tried to focus in on the things which we thought were going to have a core role in terms of what the council was trying to deliver for the town, or would leave pretty gaping holes within the town's current frontline provision if we got rid of them. Which brings me on to the key question that was raised earlier about CCA. Just to give some context to CCA, CCA were in receipt of £125,000 worth of funding. So that's roughly 2/3 of everything we've had to cut from the budget can be dealt with purely through the reduction to CCA and their funding. Now, CCA's funding was equivalent to the next 3 biggest CVS organisations in West Sussex combined. The next nearest amount of spend compared to CVS is £125,000 plus £50,000 in Arran. So they were massively well funded compared to any equivalent organisation, added to which they were given a very substantial building in terms of what they could generate further revenue from. So I think it's fair to say probably in terms of CBC's funding, up until this point, we have provided them with the same amount of support as every other CVS organisation in the county combined. And the question at this point is whether or not that represents good value for money. So it's not doubting whether or not they have an important role to play, or the work they've done has been important, but whether or not we can spend that level of funding or justify it when we're having to take that amount of money out of the system. And reading through a lot of the testimonials, a lot of those charities who are expressing their feelings about the importance of the CCA are organisations that would have to lose all their CBC funding, which in many cases is all of their funding full stop, if we were going to put this money back into the budget. So members may well wish to make suggestions as to how we could fund different organisations or suggest priorities, but if they would like to see CAE's funding restored, they need to tell me which of the charities that we're proposing to fund would be removed from being in contention for funding to make that viable. The reality is that if CCA were to fall tomorrow, we have backup plans as to how the Borough Council itself would deliver its provision. And I know that there are those who feel that the independence is an important part of its role, the independence from the council. I would question whether or not that is something which we can afford any longer at this stage. Certainly it would come at a very high price to other parts of the voluntary sector if we were to have to pull that funding. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, both Kate and Councillor Lamb there for the report. I will now open the debate. Please turn on your camera if you wish to speak and you'll be brought in. Please unmute your microphone and check you're live before making comments, pausing for 3 seconds to allow for any time delay. We will now begin consideration of the report. Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the leader and Kate Wilson for this report. Just a few questions, really. Can I just reconfirm that even after these proposed community grant reductions, we would still be a very generous borough district council in terms of the total grants that we were making available in the community? I think that is the case. On Crawley Community Action, there is a remark that the organisation has sufficient unrestricted reserves. And I just like to know a bit more about what that means. Does that mean the ability to fund itself at its current level, and if so, for how long? Or does it mean an ability to fund itself at a reduced level for a different period of time? And in the same vein, can we hear a little bit more about the plans of Crawley Borough Council to provide an equivalent service to the Crawley Community Action in terms of, I suppose, signposting and assistance to other voluntary sector organisations? And finally, on Crawley Community Action, I think given the scale of the funding cut here, on the OSC, we should wish to be satisfied over the coming year that the actions that the council has taken through its community services team have in fact proved sufficient to support the voluntary sector organisations currently supported by the CCA. So we should wish to revisit this and validate that this has been an effective arrangement. And then on the Ifield Mill Crawley Museum, again there's a remark about sufficient unrestricted reserves, so if that could be elaborated a bit. Then on to Crawley Festival. Now with this, the Crawley Festival in normal years is a really important part of our cultural offer, and I'm going to say as well it's really important in an economic recovery context, because one of the agendas for restoring the vibrancy of town centres is to have an events calendar, so really programmes of events that people wish to visit again and again, so that you come to town for that as well as for retail therapy. So I think that the sort of evidence we should wish to see in the coming year is that we've been successful in pointing Crawley Festival at alternative sources of funding, so that it remains a going concern. And similarly, with AIDS UK, we should want to see in the coming year evidence that the funding cut here has indeed been mitigated and compensated by their actions, by ourselves and others. But subject to those provisions, I'm happy to support the report. Thank you.
So,
Councillor.
Thank you. Quite a lot to unpack there. I'll try and work from reverse order. Age UK, I mean, we're not talking about removing all their funding. We're talking about removing funding from a part of what they currently do for us, for that grant funding. which is already replicated in other contract arrangements that we have with other charities. So that shouldn't have an impact on frontline provision for the elderly and trying to access support. Crawley Festival, there's nothing to stop them applying for the match funding pot, and I think this is the key thing for people to bear in mind, is there is still, even if you haven't got a guaranteed ability to bid for a contract, you still have the ability to go for the match funding pot, which would enable anything which is received from elsewhere to, of course, be match funded by the Borough Council. So there's no reason why an established charity wouldn't necessarily be able to secure that funding, but they will have to, go out there and secure other sources of funding as well to maximise the benefits of that. And I think there is a the democratic element to this, almost, in that if an organisation can't attract a sufficient level of support, then it doesn't necessarily carry the level of support within the community that you might well hope to be receiving council funds. There are limits to how much I can talk about some of the reserve stuff. Apparently that constitutes part B, because we're discussing their financial arrangements. What I can say is that there are a sequence of conversations that happened with CVA over quite a while, and certainly the feedback that we got was that due to other contracts that they have and other sources of income, that they'd be able to sustain themselves, plausibly sustain themselves without CBC support. And this, we're not talking about taking the building away from them. We're not talking about saying the organisation necessarily will collapse. They will still have access to that commercial property. They will still have potential to access transition funding, and that's if they can come to us and present a plan with how that would do some good to get them to a more stable long-term footing. Admittedly, the amounts of transitionary funding we're talking about is technically still more than any other CBS in the county would have received, which raises questions about the efficiency of the organisation in delivering its set goals. Then they've got the possibility of accessing that to get themselves to that long-term, stable long-term footing. From a Borough Council position, we have not started replicating CCA support yet. There would be no point in doing that. We need to have a clear understanding of where the organisation is going. But speaking with officers, there is no doubt that we could provide a similar service if required to, if the organisation does go under, given that most of the alternatives within the county operate on as little in some cases as 32,000 a year. So bearing in mind that we're only part of their funding, we're already providing 125,000 on top of the commercial property, it doesn't seem implausible that they could find some footing that would keep them afloat and active beyond direct council funding. I'm afraid I've lost some of the other questions in all of that, but no doubt you'll inform me if there was anything particularly critical.
Councillor Lanza. Councillor Lanza, would you like to reply there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank Councillor Lamb for those remarks. I mean, I think he's covered most of it there. The point I'd like to reinforce is that I think we, as an Overview and Scrutiny Commission, should see over the course of the year during which these changes take effect some kind of reporting back on what that actual effect has been. Okay, and I think that's really important. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lanza. Councillor Lamb, do you wish to comment on that about future reporting?
I need to say that would make a lot of sense. No problem at all with that happening.
Okay. Councillor Burgess, I believe, has a question.
Thank you, Chair. By and large, I think this report is really good. And just to say that, in my opinion, paragraph 3, it should be 3.3 at the bottom of page 55, is the key. Currently, funding is tight. We all know this, but we as an authority need to ensure that any monies granted to organisations is well spent. We need to ensure that the organisations use money given wisely. Now, there are many groups, some large, some small, who benefit from the grants being given. And it is vital that in the coming period of time that they work towards those key points given in paragraph 3.2. That's basically just an observation. I want to come on now to table 1, paragraph 5.9, page at 58. It mentions that some groups receive 1 year funding and others receive 2 year funding. Am I right in assuming that all groups have to say how they intend to use any money they're allocated? And for those in receipt of funding over 2 years, do they have to submit how year 1 money was spent before year 2 funding is allocated, or is it automatically assumed the organisation is doing okay and the money is allocated? And next, there are 6 outcomes at the bottom of table 1 on page 58. These are the ones that are currently being used. Over time, could additional outcomes be included, or maybe even existing ones taken away, because over time things do change. And one final thing, again, more of an observation, several of the organisations have been given funding in the past are small groups, and it's very evident from the testimonials submitted that the Crawley Community Action have done much in the past to assist such groups, and they should be thanked very much for the work that they've done in the past. However, we know that times are changing. New ways are needed to help groups achieve their aims. I imagine that crowdfunding will help. Not that I can do anything about it, but crowdfunding should help. But community officers need to be in positions to help with this. Am I correct? And also, how can CCA be encouraged to continue to help emerging groups? Thank you.
Councillor Lamb, were you able to hear all Councillor Burgess's questions, or would you like Kate to
yes,
answer?
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now and see you. Yes, we can hear you, Peter. No, we can't now. Kate, please, can you step into?
I'm happy to do my best to respond, and then something if that's touched on again. I think, you know, the reality is that those objectives can change. They're a temporary measure. You know, what we're trying to do is to find a way of adapting in a very short period of time to the level of funding that we have. You know, if that doesn't make sense, then that can be changed later down the line. And certainly, as you've already we've already just committed to, we're happy to come back to OSC and we can look at these things again in the future. Crowdfunding will be a challenge, but I'm sure a lot of these smaller groups can help to attract it, and there will need to continue to be some pairing up of local charities with other potential sources of support. We know that there is potential for external funding out there. In some ways, we've been too easy a place to approach for funds in the past, people too obvious place, and maybe it's opportunity for us to try and bring more external funding into the town using a lot of those funding. I think there are opportunities, and we will have to work with them if CCA is no longer there. If it's still there, then they'll clearly still be able to continue to marry people up with potential funding bodies.
You're on mute, Tina.
Sorry, can I bring in Kate,
Anything I
please,
missed?
for her comments as well on this?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to pick up on Councillor Burgess's questions around process at the front end of his questions. The first, I believe you asked whether funded groups need to say how they're going to spend the money. Yes, they do, very much so. That's a very important part of the application process and how they intend to use it. And also at the end of the funding agreement, they also have to provide information as well as a 6-monthly report, just so that we can see what progress that they've made, including how they've spent the funds that have already been given. So that applies to both those that receive a 1-year fund as well as 2-year funding. So there's a break clause after year 1, at which point the funded organisation needs to then provide an action plan and an update on what's gone the year before and what they're proposing to do the following year. So hopefully that will give you reassurance, Councillor Burgess, that the right processes are in place.
Councillor Burgess, have you any further questions?
No further questions. Just to say thank you very much to the responses from both Councillor Lamb and from Kate Wilson. I do have a feeling that at the end of the day, somewhere down the line, funding for small groups who need it will be in a better place than it currently is, maybe even with less funding available, but I'm sure it'll be, because there is a will for things to succeed.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Can I bring in Councillor Barrett?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I also apologise that I'm having terrible connection problems today, so please bear with me if I break up or if you're not able to hear me. Can you hear me at the moment?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. We can hear you, Richard.
No, that seems to have frozen.
We can hear you loud and clear. Richard, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Really, well, three questions really. One is, and I suppose this relates to the issues raised about the CCA grant. I really just wanted to check this point about those organisations with a 2-year grant ending at the end of the next financial year. That are listed in the table, because paragraph 6.2 says the current grant awards programme is not based on any legally binding contracts, but it has to be noted that organisations may apply a presumption of being funded as they are midway through a 2-year grant agreement. And I suppose what I would like to get to the bottom of, if you look at the table at 5.9 and the second, those organisations that have a 2-year grant ending in 2021-22. I suppose given what that says in paragraph 6.2, I suppose what I'd like to be clear on is what those organisations were told a year ago about those 2-year agreements. How certain was the second year? What, how much of a presumption were they given the impression that they should have? And I think it's important that we just understand that. For goodness sake.
Richard, would you like us to get that question answered?
I'm sorry, I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, shall we get one question at a time, given that you've got internet problems? We do one question at a time? Can I bring in Kate, please? Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Burrett, for your questions. So, in short, at the point at which the organisations were given their 2-year funding provisional agreement, that obviously predated the COVID pandemic, and also obviously the other financial challenges that we were aware of, albeit we were aware that this may be coming, but the second year funding is always provisional, and it's always on the basis that that the priorities can still be met. So really we weren't able to give any assurance to those organisations that second year funding would be available to them.
Thank you, Kate. I heard you perfectly. Councillor Barrett, were you not able to hear that? Can you hear me, Councillor Barrett? Councillor Barrett, you're muted.
He's not the chair, he's not.
Can I move to, does any other councillor want any other questions while Councillor Barrett gets online? I've got a question, so I'll, yeah. May I ask a question, please, either to Kate or Councillor Lamb? We have the citizens' advice, because they obviously have a legal agreement with us. I'm just wondering what's going to happen to those funds, which are quite substantial at 140 in 22-23, whether they will be reallocated to some smaller charities. Have we got any plans for that, or is this so? Councillor Lamb or Kate, I think you're the only one I can see at the moment.
Chair,
Councillor Lamb is now here.
Is it possible for me to come back? I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Can you
can't
wait?
see anything.
Yeah, I will bring Richard. I'll bring you in as soon as I know your internet's fine. I'm just asking a question myself. Councillor
Yeah,
Lamb?
sorry, I can't see any of this. This is.
So overall, we know that we're having to do this reduction in 2 phases. So up into the value of that cut that we agreed at the budget the other week. You know, that funding obviously has to disappear. But anything beyond that, it's open to, you know, to people to bid. You know, based on the criteria that the council set out within its list of objectives that we're trying to achieve. You know, ultimately, like I said, though, all of this is provisional for now. It's a new system we're having to try out because we are facing, you know, a significant reduction in terms of the pot of funding available. And if it doesn't work well the first year, then we'll have to reevaluate it the next year. But, you know, for now, there is actually more money going in than had been planned when we agreed to cut because of the transitionary funding that we've been able to award thanks to getting more grants than we'd anticipated from central government.
Thank you. Councillor, thank you. Councillor Barrett, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but unfortunately, Chair, I really don't know what's happening with Teams this evening because I can hear you, but I can't see anyone. All I've got is a picture of myself and a message that says waiting for others to join, but I can hear you. I can actually hear people better than before now, so I don't know what's going on here.
Councillor Barrett, if you ask your question, we can hear you and we will get a response.
Sorry, could you say that again, please?
Yes, Councillor Barrett, it's Chris. If you ask a question, it can actually be heard. We'll just take it like that, and we'll get a response and we'll get an answer to you. So if you ask your questions, whilst you're not seen, we'll see the chair's face.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. Well, firstly, I do apologise, but I wonder if Kate would be able to repeat the answer to the question that I asked earlier because I didn't catch any of that. But there are also 2 other points. One is regarding the table on, well, they're both on the table on page 58. One is regarding the fact that no other applications will be considered at this stage other than those organisations listed in 5.1 or which fall in the category in 5.1. Can I just clarify then that means that the 6 organisations listed at the bottom who received a one-off small grant last year would not be able to apply this year? And secondly, having tried to cross-reference this with the items in the report that refer to most organisations continuing to receive the funding that they've had previously, but listing the 4 that haven't and the explanations why. I did notice one in the table at 5.9 which didn't seem to have had an explanation, and that is if you look at the section headed organisations in receipt of an annual grant, there is an entry for the Celtic and Irish Cultural Society which says CF in brackets, which I'm assuming means carried forward, although I'm not sure what it means in that case. And they were awarded the grant last year but aren't proposed for anything this year, and that one doesn't seem to fit with any of the categories. I just wondered if someone could explain what was happening there. I hope you caught all of that. If Kate wouldn't mind repeating the answer to my first question and those 2, that would be great. Thanks very much.
Just
Thank
check.
you, Councillor Barrett. Can I bring in Kate, please, to answer?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Barrett, as well for your questions. Yes, with the first one regarding whether we had given the organisations that received a provisional 2-year funding arrangement sort of fair warning of what was to come, I would say the answer is no, because the time of year that was awarded that was pre-pandemic, and also predated the significant financial impact that was coming as well. So I don't think reasonably we could have pre-warned them on that basis. But what the 2-year provisional arrangement does allow us is to have a break clause after year 1, where we can then consider whether the work that organisation is going to do in year 2 is still necessary, and whether they've actually met, and it allows us just to see, what's happened in the previous year. So on that basis, I think that allows us to do this, to take this step. In terms of question 2, you asked about the 6 organisations that received small one-off grants from the council in this current financial year. So yes, you're correct that under the current arrangement they will be unable to apply for any grants unless we're able to get the new small grants programme launched. But I think realistically it's more likely to be for the next financial year. But we can of course support them through our grants officer and community development to identify and access other funding that might be out there. In terms of your third question, you're right. So the Celtic and Irish Society, the CF is carried forward. So they declared to us that they were unable to host the festival this year for reasons of that are obvious, I think, because of the pandemic. So on that basis,
I'm sorry, I've lost you there.
So for the purpose of the record, shall I continue, Chair?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm back now, I think.
Okay,
can you hear me? Sorry
yes,
about that.
Thanks, Councillor Burrett. So yes, just to confirm that they've been allowed to carry that forward into this and into the next financial year.
Oh, I see. So they wouldn't be allowed to apply for another year, but they're carrying that one forward instead.
That's right, Councillor. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I do apologise for all the toing and froing over this. I'm still having this funny screen, so I'm going to try leaving the meeting and coming back. So hopefully I'll be back in a minute or two. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Does any other members wish to speak? I'd like to stress that the video will be on YouTube tomorrow if you cannot hear the responses that you've had to your questions tonight. So can we move on then? All committee members have had an opportunity to speak, so we will move on to the recommendation. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair second. Councillor Rana, please can you second?
Yes, I second that, Chair. Thank you.
The recommendations are agreed. Right, we're now going to move on to receive the proposed extension of the AQMA boundary report from Councillor Jehan, Cabinet Member for Environmental Services and Sustainability, Kate Wilson, Head of Community Services, and Jill, Senior Environmental Health Officer. Please can I ask Councillor Jehan to introduce and present the report to the committee. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
You're nice and clear.
Can you hear me? Good, good. So this report seeks agreement basically to extend the existing Hazelwick air quality management area that we have, and this is because the nitrogen dioxide levels have exceeded the national air quality objectives around the Three Bridges station area. And you can see in the report on point 4.5 the additional proposed areas that are to be included within the AQMA. We have a statutory duty to do this under the Environment Act, so it's really not a question of whether we do this, but more a question of how. There were initially 2 options on the AQMA. One was to extend our current one, and the other was to declare a separate one. There aren't many benefits of declaring a separate one, as this would require a separate action plan. But by extending our current AQMA, it allows more of a coordinated and a joined up approach to address air quality issues right across all the locations in a holistic manner. And this basically helps also to prevent us from solving air quality issues in one area but then creating another problem in another. There was a 4-week public consultation to raise awareness of extending the AQMA, and I believe all the responses we received were all supportive of the proposal. Once we declare the AQMA, it then enables us to draw up an air quality action plan to target sources of pollution and then produce measures to improve air quality in those areas. Now, this also ties directly into our climate emergency work and is reflective of one of the recommendations that the Climate Emergency Scrutiny Panel included in their report. So taking this action and extending the AQMA not only shows that we're serious about tackling the climate emergency, but also demonstrates that we're serious about improving the air quality for all of our residents. I'll leave it there, Chairs. I know you have a full agenda, but I'm happy to take any questions. And I do have, as you mentioned, Jill Naramore and Kate Wilson with me to assist if anyone has any technical questions.
Thank you for the report. Members, please indicate if you wish to speak by turning your camera on, and we will begin the consideration of the report. Councillor Lanza, I believe your camera is on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks to Councillor Jance for that report. Just a couple of points, really. I mean, one is the initial readings that are kind of triggering this decision seem to have been taken in 2019, and one can readily understand why there would be some kind of delay in their interpretation. But I suppose my question is around what are our most recent readings? I mean, given obviously the effect of COVID and changed modes of transport. And I think it's also important that when we come to review the Three Bridges station forecourt improvement project, that we factor the latest data into that review and consider how the currently proposed design might impact on those readings without prejudice to that decision, of course. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lanza. On the readings, can I defer to Jill, who may have more of a sense of what the latest readings are on those, because I know she has done some work around the air quality readings during lockdown.
Hi, yes, the most recent readings for last year, so that, just to say that all the monitoring data is reported a year in arrears, because you need an annual average, and so the data for 2020 has just been collated and brought together. And we know from work we did earlier in the year that during the first lockdown, traffic levels reduced by about 60%, and likewise the air pollution in these areas went down. So the annual average figures we have for last year during the COVID outbreak have shown that actually the figures have dipped in the Three Bridges area below the air quality standard. But the latest government guidance we've had from DEFRA is that because it's an exceptional year, we need to treat it as such, and we'll look at the data over a longer period, maybe 2 years or 3 years. But currently the levels in that area have dipped below the air quality standard, but we won't be changing our decision on the air quality management area due to government guidance.
You're muted, Chair.
Apologies. Councillor Lanza, would you like to have a further question?
No, Chair, I mean, that response makes sense, and thank you for that. But I just mention again the importance, therefore, of the 2019, if you like, normal year data feeding into the review of the Three Bridges Station forecourt improvement project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bob Burgess, I believe you were next with your camera.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I'm slightly critical of what's been going on in the past as regards the Hazelwick AQMA, because in paragraph 4.1, page 40, it mentions that the Hazelwick AQMA was set up in 2015. That's 5.5 years ago. Now, currently, there's a desire to extend the existing AQMA. So what steps were taken back in 2015 to address the issue, and why did they not succeed? Will the same be happening in a few years' time to this extended AQMA? Because NO2 levels have still remained too high.
It was all small.
Sorry? What has happened? Am I still on the system? Right, okay, I'll carry on. How can we ensure, and this I think is the key, that noxious levels of NO2 are going to be reduced? Surely one of the keys to all this is education. It's all very well and good having ideas to try to achieve, but only practical day-to-day solutions will suffice. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I okay to reply to that, Chair?
Councillor Jahan?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Councillor Burgess. It's a really good question, and I really take on your point about the need for education, and I'd add to that some of the work around sustainable and active travel and transport. Around the question specifically about improvement on the current AQMA, it's a really difficult issue to tackle around the Hazelwick area in particular because of how much development there is around there, and obviously we have one of the main routes in and out of the M23 and Manor Royal, and we know that transport emissions account for the highest amount. Transport is one of the biggest reasons around the increase in emissions, and we know about the high traffic volumes around there, especially around peak hour levels. So it is a difficult one, and I'll just go back to what I was saying at the beginning about the need for investing in and promoting sustainable and active travel, because that's really going to be the main way to address those issues around transport emissions, and also just tagging on to your point about education and putting that out there for residents and us alike as well. And that's one of the things I think would be included in the air quality action plan, which will be developed. Not sure if Jill has anything more to add to that.
Yes. Yes, Councillor Yelms is correct. You know, we've done a lot of work with different aspects of awareness raising and sustainable infrastructure that's been brought forward through the Crawley Growth Plan. We go into schools, and we've had some projects which have gone into schools to raise awareness on air quality, anti-idling campaigns. We're also working with policy and planning to introduce controls on various emissions throughout the borough. So the whole action plan is aimed at trying to reduce traffic emissions and raise awareness and modal shift, behavioural change, and working in a kind of across the board manner, really, to bring all these things together, and they all add to the measures that will hopefully bring down emissions over the course of time. So we've made throughout the borough, we can see that air quality has reduced over the last few years, and in those particular areas which are hotspots with high traffic levels, we're continuing to target some of the actions into those areas. If that answers your question fully.
Councillor Burgess.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed, for the answer. It does occur to me, though, that there are two reasons why levels of noxious fumes might be high. One is that traffic is moving too quickly, and the other is that traffic is moving too slowly. If vehicles are moving too quickly, then they're giving out more emissions, clearly. If they're travelling too slowly, and I'm thinking here, first thing in the morning, the road coming down from the motorway down to the Hazelwick flyover, very often for a good half-hour period of time, traffic is slow moving at best and sometimes stationary. That must therefore increase levels. A thought did occur to me that maybe if we had a system whereby traffic wasn't able to move quite so quickly, it can't do the 70 miles an hour bit, that might in fact help, because it might help to reduce the emissions. And also, I do think that serious consideration should be given to contacting employers, a lot of whom are on Manor Royal estate, saying, can you stagger your starting time for your staff to make sure that we do not have these hotspots in terms of higher emissions? Because I'm sure if you've been on that slip road from the motorway down at the wrong time of day, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Does any other member wish to ask questions? Councillor Barrett. Councillor Barrett? Yes. We can see you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
I've left the meeting and come back, and it's a little bit better, so hopefully this will be okay. I mean, firstly, just to say that I very much welcome this report and the extension to the AQMA. Obviously, it does extend into part of my own ward where we know that there are issues around air quality, and I welcome that. I do have one or two questions and observations, if I may. Firstly, I wondered if Jill could just clarify the point about the timings on this, because it does say in the report that the findings were reported to DEF in the 2019 report, and they confirm.
Unfortunately,
the figures always being in arrears by a year. So it's not that clear to me exactly when these findings in the additional area that's being added when they actually tipped over the government level. But you know, I suppose it just seems to me that it takes quite a long time to get to the stage. I mean, it does. I think it's that we're following a fast track procedure that they're putting in place. I'm not quite sure what the slow procedure would be, but obviously if we do need to make changes, we need to get on and do it. And I just wondered if Jill could clarify the exact how it works in terms of the timing. And the second thing is, and I appreciate Jill did touch on this. I'm sorry, can you still hear me? It's telling me I need to reconnect.
You look clearer now, Richard.
I can still hear you, Richard.
Yeah, we can still hear you. Richard.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, Richard. We can hear you. Would you like to? Richard, I suggest perhaps you submit written questions.
Of course. do it verbally. And we'll...
Right. I think,
Yeah,
Richard, we now can't hear you. Richard, your microphone is on mute. Your microphone is on mute.
Chair, I'll suggest Jill comes in to
Give me.
answer that.
Shall I move on?
Can I suggest Jill comes in to answer Councillor Barrett's first question, please?
Okay. Verbal. Right.
Jill, you're live.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes. So the data, as I said before, is produced a year in arrears. We had partial year data the year before we submitted, insufficient to be able to declare on just partial year's data. So we then submitted our full year's data in 2019, and DEFRA appraised our report and replied to us, which they did at the beginning of 2020. Things did slow down during 2020, obviously, because we were diverted onto other work, and we didn't move forward to declare the air quality management area until the end of 2020, when the report was submitted through CMT and then moved through the cabinet process. So that's the timeline of it to where we are now. And the 2020 data is only been available since January, but obviously it's been slightly skewed by the reduction in traffic levels, as we discussed earlier. So that's where we're up to at the moment. I hope that that covers the timeline.
Okay, thank you very much. If you can hear me now, I'll come on to the other questions. One really sort of follows on from Bob Burgess's question about what's happened since 2015. Because I suppose it would be helpful, I think, as part of this report, to have an idea of whether the measures that have been put in place since 2015 have actually helped in terms of reducing the levels in the existing AQMA area, obviously, as opposed to the proposed extension. And I wondered if Jill could just tell us what the position with that is. I apologise, I think she may possibly have already touched on that in an earlier question. I wasn't able to hear the answer. And I suppose the other observation I wanted to make, and I'm sorry this does sort of hark back to what some people will see as a bit of a involved in the, representing the Three Bridges and Pound Hill areas, know how much congestion there is around Three Bridges station, and obviously that's why we're proposing this extension to the boundary. And I can't help observing that if we're worried about nitrogen dioxide in that area and want to reduce it, I'm not sure how we're going to do that by forcing the traffic that currently turns right out of Three Bridges station, turn left, go all the way up to the square about and drive all the way back again, because all those vehicles are then going to pass through that area twice rather than once. And that to me seems counterintuitive with the purposes of this extension. So, I do think we're going to get problems as and when that change to the arrangements outside the station is put in place. The other couple of points I wanted to make were actually on Appendix A, the order itself. I have noticed what I think are a couple of typos, which I think we do need to correct, because obviously this is a formal legal order. The first one is that the heading actually says Crawley Borough Council Air Quality Management Order 2021. If you look at paragraph 6 at the bottom of that page, it's the Crawley Borough Council Air Quality Management Area Order 2021. And I think the title should include the word order, should include the word area at the top. And secondly, there are several references on page 47 to the designated area and the modified designated area. At the end of paragraph 5, in the last line, it's actually referred to as the modified designed area. And I think that's It's just those 2 points. I know they're picky points, but as it's a formal legal order, we ought to get those right. I wondered if those two could be changed. But there is also another more substantive change that I'm going to suggest. If you look at Schedule 2 on page 50, this lists the roads that are included within the modified designated area. And I can't help noticing that there are quite a lot of roads there which are only included in part, not in full. And to give an example, St Mary's Drive in my own ward is listed there. But if you actually look at the map, it's only about 6 houses at the very far southern end. I think about 3 on each side. And I think actually this list, if it were viewed by a member of the public, could be quite confusing, because somebody, say in St Mary's Drive, could look at that and think, well, I'm in this area, when actually they're not. So can I suggest, before this is finally signed off, if it's possible for somebody to actually go through and cross-reference these roads with the detailed map, a much more detailed map than we've got in front of us, and actually identify which of those are only included in part, and perhaps add the word part in brackets after each of the names of those relevant roads on Schedule 2, because I think that would make it easier for people to understand if they were looking at it externally. So really, that's sort of 3 changes to the order, plus a couple of other questions. I apologise for so much of that, and hopefully you were able to catch it.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Jahan, would you like to reply?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Councillor Barrett, for those spotting those typos in the report. I'm sure the team can take those away and amend. So thank you for those. And as well, taking your point on the question about how some of the roads are only included in part. Perhaps that's something else that we can look into as well. On your questions around the measures and whether they've helped in the existing AQMA, that is something we touched on earlier. Jill, would you like to just repeat what we mentioned earlier?
Yes. Yes. The actions in the existing air quality management area have been in place for a while, and as I said, there's a raft of measures which we've targeted not just into the areas but across the borough as well, and they all add up to bring about improvements. Around the Hazelwick roundabout, as Councillor Yarn said, there is a particularly difficult road layout around there, which means that it's the major route in and out of Manor Royal and in and out of Crawley to the M23. Improvements haven't been as rapid as we'd like, but there are a number of things that West Sussex County Council are looking at in terms of traffic management schemes, as Councillor Burgess referred to smooth the flow of traffic around that area, and we're hoping that that will bring about improvements in the future. And I can't remember exactly what the third question was on but I think it's related to the Three Bridges area, which we haven't looked in detail at the actions and measures which we're doing in that area yet, but we will certainly be doing some modelling and some feasibility studies to see which actions will be most effective in those areas.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, does that answer all your questions?
Well, I think so. I mean, it's really just the point about, as I said, the right turn out of Three Bridges Station. As you know, like many others, I'm very, very concerned about that, because I actually think that, what is going to be put in place is going to cause traffic to pass through that area twice rather than once, and that is obviously going to double the number of vehicles at certain times. So that is bound to have an effect on air quality, and it could completely negate the purpose of actually declaring this extension. So I think it's something we need to watch. But you know, that's a decision that's been taken, and there's not a lot we can do about it now. But you know, I do think it's something that could have a severe effect. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I would just like to add some comments myself, if I may. I welcome this report because I think it's important that we do monitor air quality. But I would have liked to have seen the maps be a little bit larger and a little bit easier to see where the roads are. I actually went online to expand the maps, and even then I couldn't see all the names of the roads. That would just be it's a minor criticism because I do welcome the report, but I do, obviously, as I represent Pound Hill North, do share Councillor Barrett's reservations, although it's not on agenda item for today, but I do share his reservations about losing the no right turn and the effect on traffic. But that isn't an item on today's agenda, as I said. So all committee members have had their opportunities to speak, so we will move on to the recommendation. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair second. Councillor Rana, please can you second?
Oops. Yes, I second that. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendations are agreed. We are now going to receive the Health and Care in Housing Memorandum of Understanding report from Councillor Irvine, Cabinet Member for Housing. Diane Morgan, Head of Strategic Housing Services. Please can I ask Councillor Irvine to introduce and present the report to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks for having me at your meeting. If it appears that I made some notes to guide me in what I want to say tonight. So if it appears that I'm reading something, it's because I am reading something. So first of all, I'll just explain briefly about the Memorandum of Understanding, what we're being asked to do. The Council's been asked to endorse the Memorandum of Understanding, which is a document produced by the West Sussex Health and Care Partnership to develop an agreement for local NHS partners and West Sussex authorities to work together to improve health by addressing housing need and poor housing across West Sussex. I'll explain why I think it's important to us from a councillor point of view, and then perhaps, if necessary, Diana could come in and explain the more technical aspects of it and how it will work in practice. So why do I think it's important for us to support this? Firstly, it acknowledges the link between poor housing and poor health. And I believe that's a very important acknowledgement, and one which I don't think I've really seen before in an official document in West Sussex. The Memorandum of Understanding proposes focusing on 6 priority areas, which are listed in paragraph 6.5. And can I just ask, Chair, is my voice pitched at the right level? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll never know whether I'm shouting or not speaking loudly enough, so I'll keep going. And I want to focus on one particular area, which is in 6.5. And that's because since becoming Cabinet Member for Housing, and especially in the last year, I've had a great deal of interest and a great deal of reference to me on homelessness and rough sleeping. The numbers of rough people sleeping rough has increased a lot over the last few years. But in spite of that, you might think that numbers across the country are low enough for there to be an easy way to eliminate rough sleeping altogether. And certainly there's a government target to halve rough sleeping by 2022. But the more the issue of rough sleeping is looked into, the more difficult to resolve it appears to be. Many rough sleepers have complex health needs, and because they have no permanent residential address, they can often find it difficult to get medical help. And here are some statistics from Public Health England for the years 2018 to 2019. 20% of rough sleepers have no alcohol, drug or mental health support needs. 42% of rough sleepers do have alcohol misuse support needs, 50% have mental health support needs, and 41% have drug misuse support needs. So it seems to me that to get rough sleepers off the streets might take more than providing somewhere to live. There needs to be ongoing support, and this is where the Memorandum of Understanding can encourage the different agencies into providing support. Is this worth doing? Absolutely. The average age of death in the general population is 76 for men and 81 for women. For rough sleepers, it's 44 years and 42 years respectively. And doesn't everyone deserve another chance in life? Finally, I'd like to stress that the Memorandum of Understanding is a living document, a statement of interest, which will be developed and refined as time goes on. It can never be a finished article because it will have to reflect changing needs. It's not going to solve the particular health needs it seeks to address overnight, but it's certainly a beginning well worth supporting. And I hate to put a price on anything, but it won't cost the council a penny. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Irvine. Can I ask Diane to now provide some details? I believe you mentioned.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
And thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Irvine. I think, as Councillor Irvine said, this does provide an opportunity for us really to get to grips with the issues of tackling rough sleeping in a sustained way. There's been a lot of really positive work that's been done and some really good achievements flowing from the pandemic situation we found ourselves in. The importance is really making sure we can sustain those, and going forward the Memorandum of Understanding provides a platform for doing that, and I think most importantly engaging with health services, and that for us has perhaps been one of the biggest challenges that we've faced. In terms of the practical arrangements, it's obviously very much early days, but I think we've had some initial discussions with our colleagues in Sussex County Council and also within the various NHS services. And I think what's likely to happen is we will select a small number of projects which we collectively feel will have the biggest impact, where we're working together to improve service delivery. And we're having some further discussions on those. We have a meeting coming up on the 22nd of this month. The group, the officer group that's leading on that is the West Sussex Strategic Housing Group, which is chaired by our own Chief Executive. And that comprises all the heads of housing, senior colleagues from West Sussex County Council and the NHS, and also representation from the DWP. So it would seem to be the most effective group to take forward the development of the MOU and the selection of the individual projects that we work on, and then that group is likely to be the group that provides the forum for monitoring progress and then reporting back through the various structures within the individual organisations as to how effective the projects have been. So as I say, it is very much early days, so I can't give you a sort of definitive answer because it's work in progress, but that's how things are shaping up at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Please, members, please kindly turn on your cameras on if you wish to speak, and we will now begin the consideration of the report. Councillor Burrett.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I very much welcome this report, and it's very positive, and certainly the way that we should be going forward in terms of partnership working. I just had one question for Diana, really. And I suppose it's a sort of elephant in the room question. And you know, I appreciate that this is very positive and we want to look forward rather than look back, but there are quite a few references in this report to how achieving effective engagement of health service partners in the past has been challenging, but it doesn't actually clarify what that means or what sort of examples of things were happening. And I wondered if Diana could just explain a little bit about what that means, what sort of difficulties were.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Diane?
Yes, I think, thank you for the question. I think probably it's fair to say that particularly in relation to mental health services and providing effective support for those with mental health issues, that's been a particular area of challenge. There have been a number of successful projects working with health services. I suppose the issue has more been about long-term sustainability of those. They've been very much done on a pilot basis. But I think because of the way perhaps those NH services operate and their funding arrangements, it's actually at times been difficult to bring them on board and alongside us. And I think there is something there around perhaps selling what we can do to help the NHS with some of their particular challenges, and obviously they're currently facing many very complex challenges, but by working collaboratively there are things we can do to help them, and equally things they can do through more planned discharges for inpatients to avoid that dreadful sort of late Friday afternoon, somebody pitching up at the town hall with complex difficulties, but you know, have come out of hospital and there are no proper arrangements in place, and then you know, potentially we're looking at revolving door back into acute NHS services, revolving door homelessness, and obviously all the things we want to avoid. So that's where we're really focusing on the sort of planned hospital discharge, so that we can ensure people are accommodated in the right accommodation with the right support, and also particularly around the mental health services, all of which will help us in delivering our homelessness and rough sleeper strategies.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, does that answer?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Diana.
Thank you. Does any other members have any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much for the report. I know our team worked very hard. I had a couple that were homeless a few weeks ago, and I must say I was really impressed with how quickly the team worked and got them into a hostel, and that then didn't quite work out, but they then managed to find another place for them the same day as well. It was Councillor Irvine, you wish to speak? You put your camera on.
Well, I just really wanted to listen to what you were saying, Chair, and then follow on with a comment of my own.
Ah, okay. I was just saying how impressed I was with our department. I had a couple that were homeless and they had a dog. So open house couldn't take them, but our department sorted them out with one place that unfortunately after a couple of days wasn't ideal, and they got them somewhere else 24 hours later. So the people at my local church who had contacted me were very pleased and very impressed. So it was a good outcome. So as all committee members have had a chance to speak, we will move on to the recommendation.
Can I say make my comment?
Yes, go on. Please.
Okay, I just wanted to say, in line with what you've said, Chair, I mean, I just want to place on record my appreciation, and I hope everyone will agree, of the work that Diana and her team have done, especially over the last year, as regards homelessness and rough sleeping. I think they've done an absolutely fantastic job.
Okay. So I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair second. Councillor Rana, can you please second?
I second that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendations are agreed then. Thank you. So now we move on to the draft Crawley Economic Recovery Plan from Councillor Peter Smith, Cabinet Member for Planning and Economic Development, and Clem Smith, Head of Economy and Planning. It is acknowledged that there are amendments to slides 3 and 6 of Appendix A, along with proposed additional recommendations to be considered by Cabinet on March the 10th. These are included in the Supplemental Agenda. Please can I ask Councillor Peter Smith to introduce and present the report? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. It gives me great pleasure to bring forward the One Town Crawley Economic Recovery Plan here. And there's two simple reasons why we want to do that. If you look at the slide 3, headed a joined up approach to recovery, you will see that we've got a myriad of business organisations in our town, which is one of the reasons that it's so successful. So we've got 2 bids, of course, neighbourhood parades, we've got High Street Business Forum, Professional Services Forum, etc. that you see there, all of whom tend to work in isolation. And yet, when you then look at our actual detailed programmes of work, which you see in item 4 of the report, you see we've actually developed a town centre regeneration programme, the Crawley Growth Programme, which stretches across the whole town, the Crawley Town Investment Plan, which is what the Economic Recovery Task Force is working on, and the Employment and Skills Programme, all separate, discrete activities working with separate, discrete organisations. So this plan, quite simply, aims to put one holistic plan that encompasses and sits over the top of all the other lower level detailed plans and helps to bring in all the smaller organisations into the picture. In particular, I'm keen to see Professional Services Forum and the Historic High Street have a bigger say in what we're doing. And similarly, the neighbourhood parades, who have been struggling, some of which have been very successful, some have been struggling. So the attempt here is to bring everybody together under one umbrella. We're suggesting for it to go out to consultation so we can take everybody's ideas on board. Once adopted, the plan will be used to develop strategy and delivery programs going forward, of which we've got several underway, but to make sure that they conform and fit into an overall vision of the town. As you've mentioned, Chair, we do have an amendment to the report. We've been talking further with our forward planning team, and we felt that these changes, small change on the slide and on 2 slides, and particularly specifically mentioning limited overall available employment land supply, will help to support the consultation we're currently doing on the local plan, the amended local plan. So I recommend the report to Overview and Scrutiny Commission. I'm looking forward to hearing your comments. And finally, I would just like to say that we have been successful in the past in attracting external funding because we have had programme plans like the Town Centre Regeneration Programme. We put that together in 2015, and at the time it was more or less a wish list of things we'd like to do. But by having it, it helped us to bring other people, other organisations together to set out a vision for our town, for both our residents and our businesses, and importantly, of course, for our investors, whether they're government or the LEP or private investors. I don't know if Clem wants to say anything in addition to that, but that's all I've got to say at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Is that okay, Chair? Sorry, you're on mute.
Clem, you put your camera on. Do you wish to add to Councillor Smith's comments?
Yes, please, Chair. Just a couple of points. Firstly, I'd also like to emphasise the fact the importance of this plan is it demonstrates the role that the council is playing, in particular in spearheading the drive for economic recovery. And you know that's a key role. It's a reason why we brought all of these programmes together under one strategic framework. And not only that, if you look at the flagship interventions, you'll see a number of the interventions under the 5 strategic priorities are already coming forward, either in the pipeline or already being delivered, thanks to the Crawley Growth Programme and thanks to the Towns Fund, which we're going to hear about in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Clem. Members, please indicate if you wish to speak by turning your camera on or if you have any questions. Councillor Burgess.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I very much welcome this report, but potentially it's excellent. It's very forward-looking, which is good, ambitious, which is good, but generally speaking, the aims are realistic, which is also good. It mentions in paragraph 1.3 that the final draft will be going back to the cabinet for consideration and so on. Is it proposed it will come to the OSC before it goes to cabinet so that we can have a look at the final version of it? Because who knows, it might change from what we got on paper at the present moment. And I would hate it that we don't get a chance to look at it again. But I do think, you know, well done to the team of officers who put this together. It potentially, as I say, it is excellent, and it shows that the officers have got the good of the town in their hearts. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Okay.
Councillor Smith or Clem are going to
Yes,
reply.
thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Burgess. You've identified exactly the reasons that we put this together and why the administration worked with the officers to produce this, as you say, building on the work we've done already. I do hope that it will have changed by the time the consultation is completed, because I don't believe in tick box consultation. I want to have genuine consultation. We've already started consulting with members at the Economic Regeneration Working Group. We've already seen the presentation and the plan, and I hope that other organisations, residents, and particularly business groupings will want to contribute to it. And I'm not sure about the constitution, but I would be pleased if it comes back to OSC before going to cabinet. I'm sure OSC can put it on the list of reports to go for review. So yes, I look forward to coming here again with an enhanced plan.
Chair, you're muted.
Gosh, sorry. Councillor Burgess, would you like to?
Well, thank you. There was an additional point that I wanted to make, though, and that's on page 27. It talks about an expansive green infrastructure. A mention is made of green verges. Now, many people I know in Crawley enjoy the fact that there are many green verges in the town. However, particularly at this time of year, many get churned up as a result of golf vehicles going over them when the weather is wet. And it seems to be the same verges year on year. Could, somewhere in this plan, could very serious consideration be given to verges that are being churned up to either be removed permanently or future-proofed? I can think of several examples in the Three Bridges area where, quite frankly, at the present moment, it looks a mess and is very much to the detriment of the town. And I'm sure Three Bridges is not the only ward in the town where they are suffering from bad green verges, or should I say they are now brown verges. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Smith?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to reassure Councillor Burgess that he's welcome in Ifield at any time, where I think our verges will be equal to yours in terms of the poor condition they're in due to people driving across them during the winter. In all seriousness, we all know this is a long-term problem in the town, and I do hope that by having the vision that you mentioned earlier, we can find more imaginative and green solutions to these problems. For example, by more tree planting, which capture carbon, trees will capture carbon out the air and also improve the air quality for houses adjacent to them. Similarly, I've had a meeting today actually working with Kate Wilson and the team about planting wildflower verges for bee wilding, if you've heard of bee wilding. So there are things that can be done, and I absolutely agree with you, the time has come to do those, and I hope that we'll be able to do those under expanding the green infrastructure as well as many other things.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Burgess, is that?
Well, it would seem as though we're singing from the same hymn sheet, Peter.
Okay. Councillor Lanza, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I welcome this report and thank everyone who's worked on it. Now, it's called an economic recovery plan, but it does extend to the year 2050, which of course aligns with the zero carbon target as well. And there's a certain logic to that. But because it does extend to 2050, I think it's more than a recovery plan. I think initially it's a recovery plan, but subsequently it's about the restoration of the growth trajectory in the Crawley economy. And you wouldn't call it that, but there will come a point where optimism and outcomes demand that it be renamed beyond recovery. And on the 2050 point, if you take it at face value here, I mean, it's laudable what it's trying to do to bring together the various economic growth initiatives. But if you just take today and 2050, we're not offering much in between. And I think Councillor Peter Smith mentioned that there would be plans coming along in addition. I think we need to publicise and have sight of those plans. So we've got measures between now and 2050. It might be 5-year review points or something like that, and probably a few targets in there. We need to be fair to ourselves to this extent, in that we're always working with partners to create the right environment for economic growth, not necessarily delivering that growth on our own. But there are certain measures, for example, that could be built in there, and it might be business startups, average business lifetime retention, rate of employment, that kind of thing that should be in there. And I think broadly there can be seen to be two kind of aspects to an economic recovery and growth for ourselves and the wider area for that matter. And one I'd call the traditional recovery, which is in the traditional sectors within Manor Royal and of course the airport itself. But then there's also what I'd call the novel recovery, and that is reflected in this report in terms of building green and digital infrastructure and digital enterprises. And, you know, it's a fact of life that both are complementary. We need the novel recovery, but bluntly, we can't afford to wait that alone. We know it takes time. So we do need to see recovery in aviation and the consequent recovery in tourism and the hospitality sector as well. And to all the skeptics about the airport recovering, I just point out, we've had 2 Gulf Wars, we've had an Icelandic volcano, we've had several drone sightings, and in every case, and we had SARS, and in every case, without it, and the 2008 recession, all of these factors have different levels of magnitude, but in every case, the growth trajectory has been restored. There are no exceptions to this. In terms, aviation has the ability to recover, Crawley has the ability to recover. And what's quite interesting about the aviation recovery is that it seems to kind of get the cusp of a particularly strong argument in favour of additional runway capacity before another event comes along which dents it, and then it grows back again. it's a bit like the FTSE All Share Index. You get those dents, and then but the trajectory of growth is restored. So I feel a certain sense of optimism about this being repeated, and it's about central government and ourselves and all our partners creating the right environment. And this document does have an impressive list of partners. And, you know, let's reflect on the fact as well that within here we've got the Crawley Growth Programme, which was the first growth deal signed within West Sussex, signed by Councillor Peter Lamb and Councillor Louise Goldsmith, which has brought in or will bring in overall on its own around £60 million of investment into Crawley. And that's without the other funding that we're about to discuss. So yeah, this is good. It's a great attempt to bring everything together, but let's think a little bit as well beyond recovery as time goes on, and think about some measures and sharing some more of the tangible deliverables that are implicit within this high level plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lanza. Councillor Smith, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lanza. It's a response is a question of where to start, really. I'm very pleased that Councillor Lanza welcomes the report, and he's actually spotted the key objective here, which is this is a long-term strategic view. It's not something that is 100% cast in stone. There is an old adage, isn't there, that you have to change to stand still, and your illustrations, Councillor Lanza, around the aviation sector indicate that. The world is continually changing for one reason and another, but what we do need to do, and something that I don't like to see, is we don't want to govern our town or lead our town by making tactical decisions, because we need to make tactical decisions in the context of a strategic overview, which is exactly what this report is aiming to do, as you've so eloquently described. I'd add to your list, by the way, I remember, I think you're a similar age, but I remember that we had the fuel price shock. I think it was in the 70s when everything was we'd all going to stop using oil, and we'd never use oil ever again. And we're now 30 years, 40 years later, still trying to deal with climate change and the pollution we've caused by burning all this oil. So yes, we do need to have a vision of the sort of thing that we'd like to see in the town. We need to bring our residents with us, bring our businesses with us, and work within it to make tactical decisions. Now, we've called it Economic Recovery Plan for obvious reasons, because we've got to be out there. As you know, we're leading the recovery for Crawley in Crawley Borough Council. We're engaging with central government and others around economic recovery for Crawley, for our residents, and particularly for jobs. And this plan is one that embraces the whole town. It embraces all the potential projects that we've got on the stocks at the moment, or would like to see on the stocks. And it also sets a shape within which we can add other things and take some things out. So yes, I think I agree with your excellent exposition of our plan. I'm very pleased that you support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Lanza, would you like to make any further comment?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Does any other member wish to comment or ask questions? No. Councillor Barrett. Councillor Barrett, can you hear me? Good evening.
Yes, Chair. Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Well, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Loud
can you hear
and clear.
me?
Yes, we can. We can. Turn your camera off. Maybe then you can hear yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. Is that better?
It is better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. Can I also add my thanks and congratulations to all the officers involved in this? I think, you know, it's a great piece of work. I did have a few questions and observations, if I may. Firstly, could I just clarify? We have had an item on the forward plan for some time for the Crawley Economic Development Strategy. This has come forward as the Economic Recovery Plan. Could I just clarify that they are one and the same, and that this has superseded the economic strategy. I can see Clem and Peter just nodding. I'm assuming it's been renamed because of the obviously the changes in the local economy as a result of COVID. But I did want to just check that there weren't two separate documents. This is what was going to be the economic strategy. It's now been renamed. Okay, that's dealt with my first question without having to have a verbal answer. Thank you for that. I mean, the next thing was just on page 27, the slide headed Crawley's economy has firm foundations. That first bullet point about the economy growing by 23%, 2013 to 2018 to 5.9 billion is a very impressive statistic. But I just wonder whether it needs a couple of words at the end just to clarify what that 5.9 billion is, because it doesn't say whether it's per annum or what it is. And I just wondered what that is and whether perhaps something or whatever the particular calibration might be. That's the first one. Secondly, and I'm now looking at the amended slides that were sent round as part of the supplemental agenda. On the second of those, the one headed plan to restore economic success post COVID-19. I see a bullet point's been added which says limited overall available employment land supply, which I know Councillor Smith referred to earlier.
Councillor Smith? Did you hear Councillor Barrett then?
Well, I heard him till he dropped out. I can try on his first answer. I think Clem will correct me. I think the 5.9 billion is GVA.
That's correct.
Gross value add. Thank you. I'm not sure what Councillor Barrett wants to say on the limited overall available employment land supply, but I think he probably is referring to specific potential sites, but this point has been put in there more to reinforce the actual need for additional land, and that we are struggling to find lands for employment, and we've added this in here to actually reinforce that in the plan. And as I think this is probably the last point, I would like to thank Clem for the work he's put on this. He worked weekends, nights and weekends to get this done for us. And I think it's important for Crawley that we've got a strong plan to lead us through the recovery, and I'd like to thank Clem personally for that as well.
Thank you.
Oh, Richard's back.
Councillor Barrett?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I apologise, but it got me out of the meeting. And as I came back, Peter was answering my question before I'd actually finished asking it. So I wondered if I could go back to that. And I've got a couple more points, and also the earlier question about the 5.9 billion. What I was basically trying to say was that we've got a bullet point which says limited overall available employment land supply, which has been inserted after another bullet point which says business investment to occupy vacant manor or sites. And the point I was trying to make was that I find that those 2 points quite contradictory. And I mean, Peter was right, you know, that I have an issue with a particular.
Councillor Barrett, can you go off camera and see if we can hear you better, please? Because you've dropped out again. Councillor Barrett? Well, Councillor Barrett's offline. Can I ask a quick question, please? On 7.2, we've got equality impact assessments will be carried out as part of the process of drawing up the final draft. I'm just wondering whether we'll also do a climate change impact assessment, please, since we mentioned, you know, green growth everywhere. So is that's more for you, Peter, or is it for?
Yeah, well, if I could just comment on that. I haven't gone live. Yeah, I've proposed to Councillor Jarnes that we should look at putting that into all our reports in the same way, that the climate change emergency should factor into everything we do. But clearly, a number of the key strands in this report, particularly the green ones, but other ones as well, are designed exactly that, to take on the challenges of climate change. The same applies to a lot of the work, in fact, we're doing in the Crawley Growth Programme. If I may, I know Richard didn't finish the point, but he points out a potential contradiction between vacant sites and shortage of land. Well, the issue there, of course, is we do have vacant sites, and you always do have it's a natural churn, I think, where one use ceases and another one comes along. But it's the more important thing is, apart from attracting people to occupy vacant sites, we've got to actually expand the number of sites we have altogether. And Clem's put that in there. I think I should ask Clem to answer, clarify that.
I'm happy to help answer that question. Okay, so yeah, really the difference is that the vacant sites are being experienced at the moment in Manor Royal as a consequence of the current recession, which is being brought about by the COVID pandemic. The point about the local plan is that it forecasts the overall employment land need for the borough to 2037. So it looks at the long-term picture in terms of what Crawley's employment land need is. And the economic growth assessment carried out forecast that Crawley will have a significant employment land deficit. Therefore, it makes perfect sense to add the limited available employment land supply point into the economic recovery plan, which obviously has a strategic framework to 2037, which is exactly the same timeline as the local plan.
Thank you, Clem. Thank you, Clem. Councillor Barrett, did you hear that? Councillor Barrett, if you can hear me, I suggest you email any further questions to Councillor Smith. Is that agreeable to you, Councillor Smith?
I'm sorry, I just couldn't hear any of that. I've got a couple more questions, if I may, but I don't know whether we'll be able to do.
I'm happy to receive emails, Chair, and I'll be delighted.
Well, yeah,
Clem and I'll be delighted to answer. So.
With respect, Chair, having spent a lot of time, reading through the paperwork, it does create extra work if you've then got to put something into an email rather than ask it in a meeting. Is it possible for me to ask the questions now? There was the one I asked about the 5.9 billion and the calibration of that, Chair.
Try firing one now, Richard, but if you drop out again, I really think we're going to have to go to written questions, please.
Okay, well, there was the question I asked earlier about the 5.9 billion and the calibration on that. There was the one about the 2 bullet points about the employment sites, which I just couldn't count. Sorry. A couple of other points I wanted to make. Sorry, I'll get there in a second. Yeah, there's several references, one on page 32 to green infrastructure. And I really just wanted to say that
Richard? Richard, are you there?
It was here, I think it's referring to something slightly different. Yes. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now, but please, can you get to your question? Yes, we can, but can you please be quick with your question?
Yeah. I will try, Chair, but it is very difficult when you're struggling with the technology. What I was trying to say was that when we read excerpts from the local plan and planning reports, there's often references to green infrastructure, which basically means landscaping, tree cover, etc. We're talking about digital green infrastructure here, which I think is referring to something else. It's referring to infrastructure for greater connectivity, etc. And what I'm trying to say is that I think we're in danger of using that term green infrastructure for 2 different purposes, and we do need to be careful about that. And finally, the other thing that I wanted to say was on the next page, the slide relating to skills for the future. I mean, there's some very exciting opportunities there. But I think one thing that's perhaps missing is that we have talked a lot in the past about aspirations and the need to raise aspirations of a lot of people in Crawley in terms of, you know, what they could achieve and what could be achieved as a result of these things that have been put in place here. And I wonder if there's a missing link in all of this, which is perhaps some sort of publicity campaign to actually raise aspirations, particularly amongst those people who've perhaps been made redundant over the last year as a result of, you know, the effect of COVID on the airport, etc. To actually say, you know, why not think about doing this? Why not think about this particular career, this particular way forward? And these are the facilities that we're putting in place to try to help you achieve that. And I just wonder if there is room for some sort of publicity campaign to try to do that, because what I wouldn't want is put all these flagship interventions in place, but find they're not taken up because of a lack of aspiration that we haven't actually encouraged. So really, it's those are 4 points. I apologise that that's all been a bit disjointed, but if Clem is able to pick up on those, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Smith, did you manage to hear all that?
I think so. I got 4 points. I'll go through them quickly because we have done several of them at least twice already, and Clem can clarify or add any additional comments at the end. The 5.9 billion figure is gross value add per annum, and that's the figures for 2018, I guess. The second point is the apparent contradiction between vacant sites and shortage of overall land supply. Now, the vacant sites, you continually have vacant sites that they tend to become vacant, then get reused for something else. You always have those as part of natural churn, and we want to make sure that manure oil is attractive for them to get reused. We similarly need, as has been done in the local plan, to project into our needs into the future, and that's where the shortage comes in, because over time we don't have an adequate supply. In terms of the green infrastructure, yes, I think Richard's got a very good point there. We as a society use the word sustainable to use a whole variety of things that are not really what sustainable really means, and the same applies to green really. And of course the green in the economic recovery plan is more around the strategically environmentally aware industry and activity, rather than street scene type green of trees and things like that, although it would encapsulate those as well. In terms of the comments about publicising skills, one or more of the strands in the plan are to have a significant gear change in the skills opportunities that we deliver to Crawley residents. And I think Richard was at the Economic Regeneration Working Group where we heard some things that are happening at Crawley College on that one. And so, yes, we very much agree with the comments Richard says. We've got to upskill our workforce. They deserve that opportunity, and we want to make them ready for the 21st century. And we have got strands in the recovery plan or the long-term strategic plan to actually support that. I don't know if Clem would like to clarify or add anything to that.
No, I think you've covered that, Peter.
Oh, that's a first. Thank you, Clem.
Thank you, Councillor Smith and Clem. Any other members got any other questions, please, or comments?
Sorry, Chair, could I just...
Councillor Barrett?
Sorry. Sorry, Chair, could I just come back on to thank Peter for those answers? I caught most of that, but the one I'm not sure whether it was covered was this point about, so I'm trying to find it now, the 5 point.
Found it?
I think, Chair, he must be referring to the 5.9 billion.
Can I
which
Councillor
is gross
Barrett.
value add. I can put it in the chat. Or I'll ask Clem to put it in the chat.
That question.
Yeah.
Let
Clem,
answer it.
Clem, do you wish to speak?
Yes, please.
Right.
Okay, so 5.9 billion. It should have the words GVA after it, which stands for gross value added. And what that means, it's the total value of economic output in Crawley in a particular year. So 5.9 billion is for the year 2018, which is the latest data that we have on Crawley's economy.
Councillor Barrett, does that answer your query? Okay. Can we move on then? Can I just ask a quick question myself again? On page 33, skills for the future, which I welcome, but the aim is to significantly improve overall social mobility among Crawley residents. And it is an unfortunate fact that our youngsters are going off to university and getting qualified, and they're not coming back to Crawley because we haven't got housing or whatever, or maybe the fact that there's not the right jobs here. How are we going to address that, Councillor Smith, please? Councillor Smith?
I was just waiting to go live, Chair.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
The point you've made there, Councillor Bellman, is actually at the heart of our skills and employment programme that we already have in place. And that is that we have to actually match the skills of our people with the demands and needs of businesses or investment that's coming into the town. And that we have a gross mismatch at the moment, I think, where people with certain skills can't find employment to take advantage of those skills in our current businesses. And similarly, businesses have needs. I've talked a lot to a company like Electa, where they want top IT skills, and they can't find them in our workforce, because I think anyone who's been to uni gets those skills. They don't necessarily come back here because of the mismatch. So yes, that's the element around joining together the training, the skills needs of employers, and increasing the number of high-tech jobs, i.e. higher paid, perhaps more interesting jobs, is integral to the whole plan. The only thing we can't deal with, of course, is the gross distortion in house prices and the cost of renting in the town. That's another matter altogether. It's outside this programme. But we are trying to put together the pieces that will help people, especially younger people, to have better outcomes to their lives than they might have done, and also to have give employers the opportunity to bring high-tech businesses and high-tech opportunities to Crawley. More, I should say, more of those. Rather, we've got plenty of already, but we need more.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Smith. My point is more that the skills, unfortunately, have legs, and they walk away from Crawley for whatever reason, that there's not the housing, etc. And that's why our businesses are finding it difficult to recruit people with high IT. And it's one of the facts, you know, we've got to look at London. London has survived because there is such a high level of skill of the workforce in the same businesses, and that's why businesses are attracted to London, or used to be, because there is such an enormous pool of IT professional people. And have we got that vision for Crawley? But somehow we've got to provide all the infrastructure as well, have the somehow better housing or whatever that these people require. But Clem, I see you put your hand up. Would you like to come in there?
Yes, please. Yeah, I mean, it's in answer to your question, I think one of the reasons why Skills for the Future is not a standalone strategy, but is integral to the economic recovery plan, because it is inextricably linked to the ability to generate exciting new jobs. So, for example, the green transformation strategic priority is all about generating exciting new jobs in the green net zero carbon agenda. And all that has the ability to retain young people in the area. as well as the fact that, for example, with the town centre renewal strategic priority, a key part of that is developing good quality accommodation for example, young people to come and live in and remain in Crawley. So all of the plan is inextricably linked together. You can't do one element of it without the other. And I think the package itself is what will attract and retain young people in Crawley.
Thank you. It's a huge subject, and obviously lifestyle. COVID has changed our lifestyle, and a lot of youngsters now don't want to be in flats and things, but that is opening up another whole area of discussion, and we haven't got time for it. But thank you for your answers. I will move things on then. Thank you very much for a very interesting report. All committee members have had an opportunity to speak, so we'll move on to the recommendation. I move that the Commission notes the report, including the documented changes to Appendix A, and request that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to Cabinet through the Commission's comments sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair second, please. Councillor Rana?
Yes, I second that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The recommendations are agreed. As mentioned, we now have a supplemental item on the Crawley Town Stills Fund, which has been published in a supplemental agenda. This is closely linked and related to the previous item. Please can I ask Councillor Peter Smith again to introduce and present the report to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope, well, I'm sure everybody's heard that there was a budget last week and that the Crawley got awarded £21.1 million to fund our Crawley Town investment plan. We were one of 101 towns that were invited to bid for these funds. Due to the hard work of Clem and the team, we managed to put in a bid for the full £25 million as one of the first cohorts to be considered by government, and we were also, I think, one of only two authorities that were awarded funding in the announcements made by the Chancellor of the Exchequer on last Wednesday of £21.1 million. So basically, this report is to delegate authority to the Chief Executive in conjunction with the leader to sign the heads of terms agreement with the government. Before that, Clem and the team have to do some work to change the project scope from the full set of projects that were going to cost 25 million to reduce it to 21.1. So we're going to have to revise some of the budget estimates and review. I think one of the projects we propose has not been approved by the government. But broadly, this is very good news for the town. We've got some money, slightly less than we wanted, but we've got money to fund this plan. And this report enables us to sign the deal with the government and to enable Clem and the team to get on with the work prior to receiving the funding in 2022.
You're muted, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Right, thank you for the report. Can members please indicate if you wish to speak by turning on your cameras and have your questions ready, please. Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm glad this item has been brought to the Commission, because it does follow on very well with the economic recovery plan that we've just discussed up to the year 2050. And I think, first of all, congratulations to everyone involved in completing the submission, and all credit really as well, we need to say, to everyone on the, I'm not thanking myself here, by the way, but I should refer to the full membership. I should refer to the full membership of the Crawley Economic Recovery Task Force and the Town Funds Board, because there are a lot of people on that who agreed this bid of up to £25 million to fund everything. And Yeah, congratulations, because we've succeeded in acquiring the bulk of what we bid for, and not everyone was successful. In our region, I think there's about 4 in our region or something like that got some funds, and I must express the hope that even for those elements that we perhaps will deprioritise, where we could use another, I think 3.9 million. I hope we will undertake to proactively look for other funding sources in the future to complete the programme, and that might well include through the Coast Capital Local Enterprise Partnership, for example, and indeed if we're able to secure any additional unring-fenced grants that might enable us to fully fund the balance of the programme. But the programme looks good, and everyone who worked on it has done a good job, and I thank the government for the allocation that we've received. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Lanza. Clem, you put your camera on. Do you wish to further comment on what Councillor Lanza has said?
Thank you for Councillor Lanza for your comments of support. Thank you.
Yeah. Does any other member wish to comment on this marvellous piece of news that we've received? I would just like to add that I believe we're one of only 45 that were successful this time out of the 101, so we did really, really well. I believe Swindon only got 19 million, Colchester 18, so to get 21.2, we've done incredibly well. Councillor Smith, you raised your hand then.
Yeah, you've reminded me there's a bit of clarification I should make. As soon as we were told that we were on the list of 101 towns, I keep praising him now, but Clem worked night and day to get our bid in, and we were in cohort 1, one of, I think, 2 towns in the southeast, and it's no mean achievement, and public sector are not necessarily known for being energetic, positive, vibrant, and getting on with the job so quickly, but Clem certainly does that with his team, and it's in good part due to the great effort they put in on this bid that we've secured this money. So, and they should be, we should be very grateful to them for that. 21.1 million it is. He doesn't get a cut, by the way. It's fake. Nor do I. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure success will build on success, and I'm sure maybe we'll get public funding as well on the back of this. It's great that we've been awarded it, but I'm sure this is just the beginning now of lots of reports that have got to be submitted before we actually get the money. But it's a great beginning and a good start to 2021 for Crawley. Any other members? No. Right. So all the committee members have had an opportunity to speak. So we'll move on to the recommendation. I move that the commission notes the report and the views expressed during the debate are fed back to Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask that the Vice Chair seconds, please. Councillor Rana, please can you second?
Yes, I second that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendations are agreed. Right, now we come on to HASC. The last meeting of HASC took place on the 24th of February. Please can I ask Councillor Bob Burgess to provide a brief update from that meeting?
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. As you've just said, this is a report on the HASC meeting held on Wednesday the 24th of February 2021. At the start of the meeting, the following points were made. Firstly, mental health services and provision are going to be incorporated into general practice. And secondly, work will be taking place to encourage young people to choose work in the health service as a positive career choice. The substantive item on the agenda was a report on improving mental health services for adults and older people in West Sussex. Part of the work was to ensure that the voices of those in communities whose voices are often less well heard were included in any of the findings. And these included people from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups, those in the LGBTQ+ community, and those who live in rural communities. The report was extensive with a variety of aims. Number one, improve the quality of wards. Several were old and outdated, and there was a need to provide more modern accommodation. The preferred model initially was to establish single-sex wards, but finally it was decided to continue with mixed-sex wards at new, more modern sites. Concern was expressed about the use of mixed-sex wards, but it was clarified that only communal areas in the wards would be mixed-sex. There would be a separate corridors accessed by a key system, which would be single-sex for the sleeping accommodation. Also, more beds have been found for use in the service. 2. Transport to and from wards. Transport provision is much better in the north of the county, and those affected as a result of having to travel further than previously would be given support in terms of travel allowances, plus the provision for overnight stay facilities for families. In some areas there were issues concerning parking. Work will be undertaken in these areas to address the pressure on roads near to facilities. 3. Strengthen community care for people. There is a clear preference that people should be cared for wherever possible in their own homes. Steps are being taken to improve community services by providing greater access to crisis and urgent care, and also home treatment service. And finally, establish centres of excellence for those living with dementia. Crisis centres, sometimes called cafes, supporting mental health issues, are present in some areas. However, it was felt more were needed based on centres of population. These centres would provide an alternative to hospital admission. Concern was also expressed about the need to improve support for carers. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess, for a very full and detailed report there. So now we move on to the forward plan. The forthcoming decision list is featured on your agenda and also on the Council's website. I will ask the Democratic Services team to list those that have been referred. Heather, please.
Thank you, Chair. Before I read the list out, I'd like again to take the opportunity to remind members that they receive emails once a forthcoming decision notice has been published. The list is updated and is readily available on the website. Although looking at the published agenda, it has displayed better within the agenda than the website this month, so I expect it will be included as an attachment for future meetings. I would advise, wherever possible, not to wait until a commission meeting to inform Democratic Services if there is an item that members wish to refer, particularly given breaks such as recess. That being said, you will see from your agenda the meetings scheduled for the year with the reports already listed as heading to future cabinets. The shaded reports indicate those that have already been referred. And should you wish to refer any further items, please indicate by turning your camera on and clearly state the reasons for the referral. Alternatively, with future forthcoming decision notices, once they've been published, you can just email Democratic Services. But if there's any future ones on the list in your agenda that you wish to refer, please indicate now. Thank you.
No cameras? Right, okay. As chair of the commission, I'd like to request a report to either of the June's OSC meetings on staff sickness levels with COVID-19 and the effects of working from home on this. Officers have already been briefed on this. Supplemental agenda with no supplementary items on the agenda. As this is currently the last meeting of the year, I'd like to thank all members of the Commission for their time throughout the year and their contributions during the meetings. With the business of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission of the 8th of March 2021 concluding, the meeting is now closed at 21:25. Thank you for your time tonight again.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.